Our next presenter is Roy Kaufman from the Copyright Clearance Center.
Thank you. Forward button moves it forward. Forward button moves it forward. Crazy. Hi there. Welcome. So for those of you who work for a publisher or publishing society, sorry, get the timer going. I want to take an extra few minutes there. Who are familiar with Copyright Clearance Center. Most people have a passing familiarity because once 20 years ago someone signed an agreement with us, and since then you get a check from us every year. And that's a good thing. It certainly opens a lot of doors for conversations for us. But we do a lot more, and specifically I'm going to talk about one of the many journeys we've taken recently, and this one involves text mining and really trying to meet what our users do. So I'm starting with this slide here, which is the historic way that we kind of see our place, which is on the left are rights holders, that would be you guys, and on the right we'd have our users. So that would be think a typical user are large customers, big pharma, big chemistry, people who pay the license fees that then we split up and give back to you guys. But what we've noticed over the past few years is these lines have really started to blur quite a lot. And one of the things that's really begun blurring these lines is big data, text mining, AI, whatever buzzword of the moment you want to use. Yes, there's a lot of hype, but at the end of the day, it's using a lot of information to solve problems, which is exactly what publishing is supposed to be about. So our sort of brief version of this history begins in 2012. And what happened was, I'm also a lawyer. I do government relations as well as business development at CCC. And so there's a phrase many of you may be familiar with from government relations, which is called regulatory capture. And the notion of regulatory capture is a particular interest has controls over the lever of government. And during this time period, the government in question was 10 Downing Street, and the levers were being controlled by Google. And so Google the British government commissioned a copyright study to determine if copyright was fit for purpose for the digital age. And one of the conclusions that they came out with was that there needed to be a copyright exception for text mining, and Britain was falling behind. There was absolutely no empirical evidence for this, but it made for a good slogan. And so CCC as an organization created to sort of solve copyright problems was like, okay, well, here's this report and says there's this big copyright problem around text mining. What are we going to do? Well, let's have a meeting. And we brought 100 people into a room in Amsterdam, and they were scientists, there were researchers, big pharma, big publishing companies, small publishing companies, and we asked a couple basic questions like, do you guys know what text mining is? And is this important? And is copyright the problem? Because we thought, hey, great, copyright would be a problem. We'd create a copyright license, problem solved, walk away, we're done. Mic drop. So what happened was we put everyone in the room, and what we discovered was, yes, the pharma companies and the researchers wanted to text mine, that the publishers wanted to enable text mining, and the problem wasn't copyright. The problem was aggregation. There was some license normalization, which was to say, people who were licensing content, they wanted to have a consistent set of rules to enable them to mine it, but the real challenge was sort of pulling it all together. And so we took that and we created what we call XML for mining. That's XML for mining. We shortened it to XFM because we live in an organization that loves acronyms. So we launched XML for mining, or XFM, and we got a bunch of publishers, and what we did was we not only normalized the rights, but we normalized the content. So we now have this big data set of normalized content, subscription and non-subscription, and then there are rules over what you pay to mine different things, whether you subscribe or don't. And that was okay, because that brought us in conversations with the researchers who wanted to use these big sets. But then what we kind of discovered was they were having problems that we identified as publisher problems. So now, think you're the pharma company, you subscribe to all this content, and you want to now put the machine at it. But as we learned from the sessions this morning, we've heard again and again, the bigger the data set, the more valuable the insights you're going to get out of it. And at a pharma company, there's a whole lot of content that they don't think of from a publisher perspective. It might be their research and their lab notebooks. It might be their inserts. It might be their medcoms. But there's all this information, and the value of the information, if matched up with the publications, make the publications more valuable and the insights better. So what we did was we acquired a company that had a lot of experience solving those problems in publishing companies. So breaking down data silos, bringing content together, adding the analytics, and started saying, well, we're going to apply publishing to these non-publishing sectors and try to get them to have these large data sets. And then since then, we've gone further and we've actually hired a pure data, what I refer to as a pure data scientist. We have people who are great on metadata, a lot of people who are great on content normalization, so, but someone who's really doing data science. And then we have our own sort of what we call our CCC labs. I'm going to show you some results and then tell you how we actually apply those against real world, God, I'm running out of time, real world content. So this is completely unreadable. I was sort of hoping in the large one it can be read. So this was, we did a word map of keywords in sepsis, and now I'm going to go to the co-author map because this is the more interesting thing. So we took the 70 million full text articles to which we have access through document delivery and other agreements, and we decided we would do a co-authorship map to figure out who are, what are the relationships amongst different authors within within this field, writing literally just about sepsis. So the bigger circles there, you can't read them, but those are the names of the authors who have the most articles. Now, so we did this sort of as an experiment, and then last week, by way of example, I showed this to an NGO. And this is an NGO that has people in lots of countries around the world, including post-conflict nations. And they're dealing with public health issues. And their biggest challenge is they might have someone in Rwanda, and they're trying to figure out how do you deal with, challenges of sepsis in hospitals with limited resources in post-conflict nations. They don't know who the experts are, and they don't know how to get to the experts. And this is an institution, by the way, that buys all of your journals, but that's not helping the person in the field. That's not helping the program officer. But if they could go to their information center and they can see these are the lead authors, and these are the connections with the authors, and these are the people who are writing about post-conflict nations, or this co-author is based in a post-conflict nation and writing with a lead author somewhere else, they instantly now know who they can call to get the advice that they need to solve these problems right then and there. What's extra interesting is a lot of people will do this, they'll do this out of abstracts and stuff. We're doing it out of full text, but because it's CCC who's doing this, behind each of these names, of course, you've got all the article metadata, but we also have the rights metadata, and we have the ability to deliver it. So for that NGO, which has a lot of money, they can say, hey, here's stuff I want to read. We can also get it to them in 5 minutes. They can click through because we have the document delivery rights, generating revenue for publishers, generating exposure. Or they can then say, hey, can I reuse this? And because we say, well, you can reuse this internally under your license with us, and here's where you purchase the other rights. So this is a way of actually trying to deliver both utility and revenue and solve the client's problems. Now, I did promise, because I'm the token lawyer here, I would do a brief excursion into another direction, which is the law and how this applies. And so I call this slide license or lose. And so what does this mean? This means when you're a publisher and you have an exclusive right, and to make copies for text mining and doing things like that, you are making copies. The moment you make a copy, you're implicating copyright. So you or an author or whomever, usually publishers usually get that right from the authors, have an exclusive right to make those copies to do the mining. However, in the US, we have a notion called fair use. In Europe, we have a text mining exception being considered. And wherever you are, whether you're in looking at fair use or statutory exceptions, one of the things courts and legislatures look at constantly is there a market? And if there isn't a market, is this a market that will be developed by the rights holder? And if they say there is a market for rights holders, there's already a market, they're not going to disrupt that. And if they think, if you can convince them that there will be a market, maybe they won't disrupt it. And if they're not convinced that this is a market of interest to you, you're out. And so I'll just take another 30 seconds. So Texaco case, which didn't involve text mining at all, basically there was a fair use case where Texaco was making copies of journal articles and giving them to researchers. And when Texaco tried to defend, the court said, you can get this stuff from a copyright clearance license. And because of that, I'm not even going to think about a fair use analysis. So because this activity was licensed, there was no fair use. Google Books case, scanning all the books in the library, and one of the use cases they had said was, to do text mining for semantic analysis, non-commercial, and the court said there is no license opportunity here, there's no license for this, CCC doesn't have a license, we're going to find fair use because of that and many other things. What's interesting in that case was Google had originally scanned journals, and they stopped scanning the journals, and that wasn't in the case because I think it would have been a much harder argument to make based on the way journals are licensed. So that got dropped out. TVIs is a video case, although it doesn't use the phrase text mining, it was almost the same as Google, where they were scanning the whole image and then giving snippets of video to customers, and there the court said, no, this is a licensed market for video, there's no fair use. So, and then in the EU, they're looking at a exception for non-commercial text mining, and the reason they're not doing commercial text mining exception is the STM industry convinced them that that was already a licensed market. So what am I saying here? If you are a rights holder and you want someday to be able to license into this market and make money into this market, the sooner you're in this market, the better off. First of all, it helps your users. So that should be the beginning and the end. It drives more value to your users. But the less you engage in the market, the more likely your ability to set the terms of engaging in the market are going to be taken away from you. And so that's it.
Thank you.